Welcome to Salvage, a podcast for conversations with artists about the repurposed materials they use in their art practice. Hi, this is Natalia. Thank you for being here. Please enjoy my conversation with Stephanie Hongo. Stephanie is an American artist living in Connecticut. She has been creating art for the majority of her life, but it wasn't until she began making the trash pieces that she really felt inspired to create art for art's sake. She comes from a family of creators of all kinds, from carpentry to typography. They all have an ability to make things. And this broad range of ability and influence was a big factor in developing Stephanie's own brand of creativity. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so glad that you've agreed to be here. I'm very excited.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Your studio or showroom, is it behind you? Looks amazing.
Thank you. It's sort of both. So this is in the basement of my home. That half of it is more dedicated towards the actual working and all of that. This is basically where I do like something like this, for example. My computer is all my, clerical stuff. And then any pieces that I have on hand, since this is such a nice format for doing this, I like to put them behind me, obviously,
Yeah,
so you can
of
see
course.
what I do.
I love the trash sign. She's got what LED? No, what's the word? I can't think of it.
Oh, it's it's an LED. It's a neon sign. Like
Neon
it's supposed
sign.
to be neon, but yeah, it's LED lights.
Okay, trash sign. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that leads me to my very first questions. What were you doing before you were creating art out of trash, and how did you arrive at making art out of trash?
Okay, so so we're going back quite a few years. For the majority of my working life, I've been trying to focus mostly in the arts, and that's just because that's where my greatest skill set is. I went to college for illustration. Interestingly enough, I don't really draw, and I don't really even like drawing very much. But for whatever reason, that's the thing that I gravitated towards when I was picking my major out. So like the arts have kind of always been a part of my life. And after I graduated college, I really didn't find much by the way of fine art. It was all basically graphic, based work,
Uh-huh.
which I didn't do any of that in college, which if I could go back, I absolutely would redo it. I would major in graphic design. I would focus on that. I would make sure that I knew it front to back, because even if you have a job right now, it seems, which isn't really graphic based art, you still need to know like Photoshop and Illustrator basically.
Exactly.
So
Agreed.
yeah,
Where
it
did you
really
go to
behooves you.
school?
I went to WestCon, Western Connecticut State
Oh,
University. Yeah, just a state school. I wanted to go to RISD, but it's expensive. So my parents were basically like, you have to go to school. So pick a major, pick a college, and figure it out. So anyway, so the jobs that I got after school, the best one that I got and the one that I had the longest was at Trader Joe's. I made like the shelf tags and all that kind of stuff.
okay.
Yeah. So that job I actually had for 5 years. I loved it in the beginning. It was great. I still have nothing but great things to say about the company. In general, they treat their employees really well. They have great benefits. They pay really well for what the job is, all of that. But if you're an artist at Trader Joe's, I feel like it's very, very different. I don't know if every artist has the same experience, but the ones that I spoke to all kind of felt like, there's this job that, you're at a grocery store, and it's like this community idea of like everyone does everything, but they have three in-house artists, let's say, and those artists are expected to do all of the art for the store, plus like ring register, bag groceries, stock shelves, like all the additional things too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't that way when I first started, but it got that way as I started.
Well, this is
down
a
the road.
revelation for me. I never knew Trader Joe's even employed artists.
Yeah, like I said, it really is amazing. If it's something that you don't mind doing, then I would suggest to people looking into it, if they enjoy art and they would like a position just kind of doing that sort of thing. Just be aware that there's this whole other aspect to the job too, which I wasn't too keen on. So I wanted to quit that job. There's a whole lot of more that went into it, but I wanted to leave. And I didn't have anything lined up things came to a head all at once, and I just decided to just straight up and leave. Quit with nothing lined up, and just decided I'll fall back on my skill set for as long as I need to. I'll just try to be a freelance artist, and I'll look for something in the meantime. So my intention was to maybe do like pet portraits or murals, things like that. Um, just until I found something. And then I was just kind of like wallowing on my couch one day looking at Instagram. And I saw, do you know who Bordalo the second is?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
They
so
make
I
these
was,
amazing contraptions. I don't even know what to call them. It's
so
all
you're
for
actually
craft.
the first person that I've asked that to that has said yes. Most people are like, no, I'm not familiar, but I had been following him on Instagram for some time. And his work was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah,
Like, okay, this would be cool. I know I can do some version of this. It would be great if I could, because they're on building faces. Like his
yeah.
work is very, very large.
It's
So
huge.
yeah, so I was like, let me see if I can maybe figure something else, that's similar. Obviously, I can't just go be, making murals without being commissioned to do so. So I was thinking, let's just scale it back, make a smaller version. So I made my first piece was a blue deer that I named Yandu. And it like after I made that piece, it just I had never made art that felt so fulfilling. And also the response that I got from it was lovely. I posted it on my Facebook, and I don't think I've ever had such a warm reception to anything I've made. And
Oh,
I've been
that's wonderful.
yeah, I've been doing art for quite some time and sharing my work. So after that, the fulfillment that I got from it and the response that I got from it made me feel very much like, okay, let's see how much of this I can do. So I continued doing that for, months without making any money off of it. I wasn't selling my work. Just hadn't built a following at the time. And I don't know, it just, for whatever reason, it wasn't picking up any steam at that point. It was only a couple months in, and I had made maybe like 10 pieces. So in the meantime, I was like, well, I got to find a way to make some money. So I got a couple jobs in the meantime, like it was like a jewelry making job that I got at one place. And then an opportunity came up at a local paint studio for me to be a studio manager for like paint and sip classes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I did that for a little while. It was like 2 years, and then when the pandemic hit, the owner of that studio, decided that she was gonna sell and move to Florida. So, it was a kind of an easy transition out of that job to start going back and focusing very much on my work, which her and I had spoke about ahead of time. I was like, "You know what? Since I have this job and I don't need the money, I'm not really focusing on my work as much as I'd like to. So I want to get back into it." So it was just like the perfect separation. Like she was able to sell the studio. I was able to leave that job.
Hmm.
And then I went right back into like really trying to push hard and make art and sell it and all of that. And that's when things started to pick up steam. And now, that's my full-time gig is that
That's
I just,
amazing.
yeah,
Amazing.
great.
All right, but I have to ask, where do you find your trash materials?
So initially, it was all my own junk. The very first sculpture that I made, it was just truly me walking around my condo and thinking like, okay, this has been in the back of this closet forever. This box of cables that I don't use. We'll take all of those things out of the recycling, old purses that have never been used in the last like 5 years that I was just going to get rid of anyway.
Hmm.
Quickly, I used up all my own junk. And the amount that I produce on my own is not enough and not interesting enough to really sustain the work that I make.
Hmm.
So very quickly, people started just donating their stuff to me, friends and family, just being like, "Oh, I saved all this for you."
Yes,
Uh,
I
all of it, all of it. It was like,
it becomes
it
a
was at
problem
the point.
quickly, probably. No.
Yeah, yeah. It was at the point where I would go over to like friends and family's homes, and I couldn't leave without being handed like a box of junk to take home with me. And it got too much. My boyfriend was like, we can't keep hoarding all of this for you to use it. So I had to finally just very graciously say to everybody, like, thank you. I appreciate this. And I love that you want it to go to art and not get tossed, but I cannot take it all. But that being said, I still do need to source it occasionally. So I came up with this really great method where on my town page, I live in Southington, Connecticut, and on our Southington Facebook page, every time I feel myself in need of some sort of junk, I'll just go on there and I'll post and I'll say, if you have, like itemize a couple things that I love using.
Uh-huh.
And I'll say, if you have these things and you're planning on tossing them, if you wouldn't mind donating them here instead. And I arranged to have a recycling bin put at my local waste management company. So it's just set up in a public
Oh,
space
wow.
where they can just go there and they can throw it in the bin. And every couple of weeks, I just check the bin and see if I have donations.
That's so cool. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it
And
works
what are
great.
your favorite materials that you usually ask for?
So I love basketballs. A deflated basketball is excellent. I do almost all animal work.
Mm.
So basketball material works very much like skin. It holds
Oh,
the
yeah.
paint really well. It cuts very easy. I don't have to struggle with it too much. So love basketballs. I love LOL doll balls. Do you know what those are?
No.
Anyone with little kids, or especially girls, probably knows. But
All
they're
right, my kids are grown.
yeah, it's my sister has two small kids, and like the friend group around there, they have them, and it makes me so happy when I get them. It's like a little figurine toy, little dolls. They're plastic and they come in a sphere. I don't think the sphere plays any part of the toy. I think it's just packaging. It feels
Oh,
very wasteful, but like the plastic that they're made out of is not only excellent because it cuts super well. It's nice and buttery, but it's firm enough that it doesn't like it's not like rubbery where it crushes if you put
mhm.
pressure on it. And I love that it's rounded because since I make animals, it's such organic shapes. Rounded shapes work really great. So LOL doll balls, basketballs. I love vinyl tubing. I love the insulation that comes on the outside of copper piping. My boyfriend's an HVAC, so he gets a lot of that from these commercial jobs.
Oh, wow. I don't think I've ever seen the installation that comes on copper piping.
Yeah, I think truly every piece behind me has some of it in it. It like I love it. It like again, it's easy to cut. It's
Mhm.
nice. It's got a rounded shape to it. It adds a lot of mass and volume. I have it in excess because since he works in HVAC, I have like a great
Right.
avenue for collecting it because they do commercial work. So they
Right.
have all of these segments of it that are too short for these large jobs that they do. So they
Mhm.
save it, they keep the copper and they, get the money off the scrap copper, but the pipe insulation is basically useless to them. So
Right.
just thrown away.
Right.
So I love taking that. So there's, and like Barbie legs, things like that, things
Oh,
that,
interesting.
yeah, or like little tiny toys that if you were to look at it painted and finished, you can still kind of make out what it is. I like that. Some of them, like, I'll cut up the plastic to the point where you can't tell what it was initially. So
Mhm.
I do like putting little Easter eggs in there where you can look at it and you can think, oh, that is definitely a Barbie leg. Like I can
Right,
recognize.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. And I
Yeah.
noticed that you attach everything with screws, is that right?
Basically, yeah. There's some things that if I can't use screws for it, usually I won't use that junk. So if it's like glass or if it's very thick, heavy metal, I won't use it. That being said, there are things that I will glue. So if it's too delicate and I really want to use it for like detail work or, it's a type of plastic that I think it'll shatter if I were to try to drive a screw through it. I will occasionally use glue, but I don't trust adhesives as much as I trust the screws.
Yeah.
So if I can use a screw for it, I would much rather do that.
Awesome. Wow. That must be fun playing with power tools all day.
Yeah.
I get to play with power tools.
Yeah, when I did first start like posting all of this and people were asking me, especially on like assemblage groups and stuff, I do a lot of posting on Facebook. I found that was a really great way to build a following is to just to share within groups. And a lot of the assemblage groups, when I would post my work, they would look at it and they think it's metal because it's painted, so you can't really tell initially. And then in saying that it's plastic, they were like, "Oh, well, how do you get it to, stay like together? Why it doesn't collapse on you?" And it's because of the screws. And then I feel like a lot of people might not realize just how easy it is to connect plastic together with screws. I think they assume that it will shatter if you try to do
Yeah.
that, which plenty of plastic will. It depends on the type. And it's gotten to the point now where I've been doing this for 7 years. So I'll pick up a piece of plastic and I'm like, oh, that's not gonna work. And just like toss it aside. Like this is not, it's not rigid or it's too rigid or it's not buttery enough or whatever it
Right.
is.
I like that you're using the term buttery. It totally
Yeah.
makes sense. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I haven't used that much hard plastic. I do work with some hard plastic, but I know exactly what you mean by
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, I get so excited. I'm like, this is perfect. I can cut it with my shears. It's not gonna shatter. Love it.
Oh, that's great. And then you spray paint everything. Is that
I do.
right?
Yes. So This is another little caveat that I want to mention. When I first started doing this, for whatever reason, I never called myself a green artist. And that's an important distinction for me to make because I do use spray paint
Mhm.
and I will absolutely change over to something else if I can find an appropriate alternative.
Mhm.
But for me, as much as I do love the aspect of helping the environment with the saving all this plastic from going into the ocean, reusing things, the art in making something cool has always been the driving purpose behind it.
Okay.
And the green aspect is like a lovely kind of byproduct of it.
Got it. Okay.
So yes, I do use spray paint, which I do realize that that's not a green approach to it, but I do love to paint them. So I know there's a lot of assemblage artists that prefer to leave the raw plastic to it. And I don't disagree. I think it's a cool look, but it's not the aesthetic I'm going for. With my work, I like very much to try to make it look as much like the intended subject as possible,
Mhm.
which for me means the color as well, like
Right.
getting in
Yeah.
there and making it all snap together and be one cohesive
Right.
piece.
Well, that's, all I think it's important for all artists, whether they're repurposed media artists or they're painters. We all have our own aesthetic. And that's once you find it, you want to stick to it no matter
Yeah.
what medium you're using.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people as I post them because I do like to show the unpainted version too because it does help the person if they're especially if they're first stumbling upon my work to realize that it's made out of junk. So I want them to see that it's a collection of many different things.
Yeah, that page on your website is really fascinating to look at.
Thank you. Thank you. And so many people too, when they do see those images, they'll say, I liked it better before it was painted, or it looks so cool unpainted. You should leave them unpainted. And I do understand what they're saying, but like you said, like it's not the aesthetic I'm going for. And it's not as if I'm opposed to it if I ever did do one that felt finished when
Mhm.
it was in that form, but they never feel finished to me when they look
Well,
like that.
then they're not finished. That's all
Yeah,
there is
right.
to it.
So I just until I get to the point where it feels right to me to do it that way, I don't see me ever doing it.
I suppose if you were able to collect, whatever animal you were doing, if you were able to collect everything, all the plastic in the same color,
Right.
maybe then you could achieve it. But
Yes.
that's so difficult to do.
Yeah. That's so how about Thomas Deidinger? Are you aware of his work?
Say that name again.
Thomas Deidinger.
I don't think so.
So he is my favorite artist alive today. His work. The reason why I bring him up is because his work does use a lot of that. He'll do his assemblage pieces, a lot of birds that he does, and they're made in this really cool way where it's like a perspective thing. I definitely encourage anyone listening to look him up.
I
But
think now that you're describing it, I think I've seen it. So it looks like a
probably
bird when you're looking at it, but then when you shift to the side, it's like
like
stretched out and there's like things inside.
yes.
Yes, I have seen the work. I just didn't recognize the name.
Yeah, so he doesn't paint his pieces. All his work is a collection of the color that he's working with, it seems,
Mhm.
from what I can tell on his page. But it's certainly an approach. It's just, it's not my approach.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So in your studio, which is now in your home, I assume that you have all sorts of protection for keeping yourself, from the spray paint affecting
Yes.
you and all of that.
Yes,
Do
yes.
you like
I wear a respirator when I use the spray paint, and since my boyfriend's in HVAC, he's very handy. He's built me a whole ventilation system.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's like I have a little paint booth,
Uh-huh.
um, which is properly vented to the outside of the house and all of that. So thankfully he just took it upon himself to do that because I was just thinking like the ventilation is just fine. I'll just wear the respirator and we're all good. And he's like, don't you realize like the smell is going into the whole house? Like we have to properly vent this. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's been that way for some time, which is great.
that's awesome. Wow. So when you start your piece, do you have reference photos? Do you make a sketch? What do you do?
Yeah, lots of reference photos. So for this, I'm making an ostrich right now. So we'll use the
Okay.
ostrich as the example. Prior to even starting the work, I'll go online and first of all, if I don't know a lot about the animal, I will do a deep dive into just information and facts about the animal, just in case there's something that I didn't know ahead of time that could potentially help the build or influence like the naming that I do at the end or whatever it is. I like to know a lot about my subjects. I just because I love animals so much. And then on top of that, it's just a fun reason to just kind of go like searching information about
Sure.
them. So I'll do that.
Rabbit holes.
And yes, and then I'll find a ton of reference material. The most important thing is that I need to have a very good reference of it head on, and then from the left side and the right side.
Mm,
Um, three quarters great, the top, the bottom, anything I can get because they are three-dimensional pieces. So 360 view if I can find it. Sometimes you'll see now, especially because 3D printing is a thing, that someone will have made a rendering of that animal, and then within that rendering they'll have a nice 360 that I can just kind of pull off the internet that
oh,
looks like it.
cool. Huh.
Yeah. There's also, if I don't have that available to me, photos will do it. It's not my favorite if I don't have all the angles covered, but I can still work from just like a couple reference materials. Or also, I don't know what the name of the company is. I'm sure I would know it if I heard it, but they make very realistic little figurines of pretty much every animal on the planet,
Oh,
like for little kids. They're small. Anyway, um, that particular company makes, since they are such great little figurines and they do have so many of them, sometimes I will just go get one of those figurines to, have a small little model so I can kind of check out what it looks like from
oh,
all sides.
interesting. Huh.
Yeah, I did that. I made a large buffalo piece and I did that with a buffalo and with a moose. So it's usually like the bigger animals that I feel like are going to be very challenging that I'll want like a solid three-dimensional figure of it. So yeah, all the reference material. Then I will take the board that I'm building it off of and cover it with brown paper and then just sketch kind of a rough outline of what I think it will look like, just taking up space, where the
Mhm.
placement of the eyes are, all of that sort of thing on this board. And then it's just about, going through my trash pile and picking out what do I think a good first step piece would be. It needs to be something that is firm enough and solid enough that it's going to, this piece, in theory, is going to have so many screws driven through it from the various stages and the layers on top of it that it needs to be super solid. Because if it's not a solid piece of plastic, it's just going to be, it's going to fall apart. It's going to,
Got it.
shatter. So the first steps are always really important, making sure that you have a good foundation.
Do you ever use like a laundry bottle for something like that? Are they sturdy enough for something like
Yeah,
that?
something like that would be okay. It's a little bit um, laundry detergent specifically. It's a great plastic in terms of its consistency, but it's quite thin.
Mm.
So it wouldn't be bad. I would use it if it was a good shape for what I was using, but I prefer if I can do it to be something a little bit thicker. I'm trying to think if I
Oh.
can something a universal type of plastic as an example, but yeah, like something that can really hold up, a ton of layers on top of it.
Got it. Interesting. I wonder if one of those, those plastic cones that they use for traffic, not
Yes.
even cones,
Yes.
cones, and then those big barrel-like things. I wonder
Yeah.
if those would work well.
Yes. Yeah, that kind of how thick that plastic is, that would be great for something like
Uh-huh.
that. It's a good first a good base.
I
First
see
step.
them broken by the side of the road all the time.
Yeah. 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 I will look at stuff and it will kind of, go back to the build of something. I'll look at like the shape and I'm like, oh, that would have been perfect
Yeah,
for whatever it was.
right.
Very funny.
So, since you do have looks like a sizable studio now, do you keep some trash in your studio?
Yeah. So I wish I could show you, but
It's okay.
it would be impossible. But it's a huge heap. So it's large. It's basically just a pen on the ground, and it is just filled with a mound of everything from broken toys, pipe insulation, Tupperware, old Christmas lights, like just junk in
Oh,
that.
wow. So you don't sort it in any way?
I have tried twice now to go through it and like kind of put things like these are where the spheres go. This is where the tubing goes.
Mhm.
And just inevitably, it always ends up just a hodgepodge mess. So I will at some point go through it again just because it's such a deep pile of plastic that there's probably a lot of great gems that have just settled in the bottom. And
Yeah.
I'm really just picking off the surface at this point. So I'll have to go through it again just to pick out the good stuff that I've been missing. But every time I try to organize it, it just ends up in chaos again.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens to me too. I mean, I'll go through an organization and I'll fill bins and then I'll start on a project and it becomes a mess again.
Yeah, yeah. And when I'm working too, it's even messier because just I let things fall where they will and I don't pick them up. I just leave them there and I'll just continue the tornado of making. And then when it's finished, then I will go through and I will try to just put back together what it looked like before I started. But while I'm making stuff, nothing gets cleaned up
Oh yeah. Yeah,
ever.
I'm with you there. It's a disaster zone. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't you feel like it makes it easier to come back to it at the end?
It does. Well, I also think that I want to leave the project so that when I come back the next morning, I know exactly what needs to keep going there. Because if I finish a project, then I come into the studio, I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
So
right.
I'd rather leave an unfinished project so
Yeah.
that I know what to get back to.
Yep. It's so much easier to pick up where you left off.
Yeah. Yeah. And then but you can't clean up because all your valuable little bits and stuff are
Mhm.
where they should be.
There was this one time when I was taking commissions. Dogs, so octopus pieces and people's pets, specifically their dogs, are the two things that I would get the most when people wanted specific commissions. And when they were specific with dogs, I had a couple people ask if they could send me their specific items from their pet. It was usually like a memorial piece. So like the animal's dog tag or like a toy or something to be incorporated within the
Mhm.
sculpture. And there was this one time that this woman sent me a dog tag to be incorporated in the sculpture. And I was putting together the piece and I don't know what I did, but I like put down something and I flung the dog tag into the trash pile, which I can't even tell you how deep this thing is. It was ridiculous. And I was just sitting there like, oh my God, I'm never gonna find it. I'm never gonna find it. What am I gonna do? And I like it was I couldn't just obviously that would be morally wrong to just pretend like I replaced it, but also she'd
Yeah.
know it was like engraved and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, I gotta find his dog tag. So I had to sit for like a day and a half and then
Oh
just go through
no.
this entire trash pile until I found this dog tag. And I found it. It worked out. Okay. But I was so mad at myself. I was like, that didn't need to happen. What is wrong with me?
Right.
Ridiculous. It worked out though. It's fine. She
That's
loved it.
funny. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised at all at the dog portraits being commissioned, but octopuses, really?
Yeah, they are far and away the most popular thing I make. I think I've made it's in the 30s, the amount of octopus
Really?
pieces. Yeah, I've made I think it's around 260 something pieces today.
Hmm.
Um and 30 something of I think 37 of them have been octopus pieces, which is a pretty big chunk out of,
Yeah, I
you
would
know,
say so.
but
Wow.
that many out of that many pieces to have that many. And they always of all the pieces that I make, typically after I finish a piece, I will post it on my Instagram first and on my Facebook.
Mhm.
And I will post it clearly for sale with all the specs and everything about it, the price, and then, DM me if you want it. And if it doesn't sell within the first couple of days, I'll then put it on my website just because it's so much more involved to post on a
Yeah,
website.
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so I wait to post there.
Mhm.
And typically they don't make it to my website. They will sell many of them within a couple hours, if not like just a couple days.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
they're
Congratulations. That's awesome.
thank you. Thank you. They're so popular. I don't know what it is. I mean, I love them too. My
Right.
wallpaper has octopuses on it. So I love octopuses, but I'm just genuinely surprised that so many other people love them.
Yeah. I feel like there's been several documentaries lately
Yeah.
and books based on octopuses or about them,
Yeah.
um, that I could think of. Like, what is it? My Octopus Teacher. Have you seen
Mhm.
that? That was
Yeah, I cried.
such an amazing, yeah, of course. Can't not cry. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
very emotional to be honest.
Yeah.
She's so beautiful.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. So I was just on your Instagram before we started chatting, and I see you have a TV pilot.
I did. I don't know if anything's going to happen with it, but yeah, that happened last summer, which is the most incredible thing that I think has ever happened to me.
That sounds amazing. Please tell us about that.
Yeah. So, actually around this time last year, this comedian that I followed on Instagram, his name is Mike Fenoya. He was like, I've seen him do stand up live and I had heard him on many, many podcasts. He was friends with a friend of mine who also did comedy. So there's kind of like knowing about him. And I followed him on Instagram. He followed me back, but we didn't actually know each other personally. And then, like I said, around this time last year, he reached out to me on Instagram and he was like, "Hey, I'm a producer on Impractical Jokers, and currently there's a writer strike going on. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. So, um, in the production world, they were looking to pitch shows that didn't involve writers. So he was thinking like, have you ever thought about doing some sort of reality show based around your work? And I was like, I mean, I was actually approached about it very not in a real serious way, but a couple years ago by another production company. Nothing came of it. But I was like, aside from that little blurb, no, not really. I mean, nothing's really ever been fully discussed. And he was like, well, if you're interested, I'd love to talk to you about it. And so we kind of powwowed about it. We kind of ran some ideas back and forth. He was like, I don't know what it would be. Would it be a competition show? Would it be like a docu-series? Would it be this, that? So of all the ideas that were kind of pitched between the two of us, the idea that he had about basically finding, famous people across the country and approaching them about me making something that is related to their life or their career.
Mhm.
So in the case of what ended up happening with the pilot, we used Brian Quinn, Q from the Impractical Jokers, his late cat Benjamin, who, if you watch the show, was sort of a fixture within the show. So it made sense kind of in the terms of his career too. So anyway, so he was like, so we would pitch basically the idea of you make a famous person's whatever it is. And we follow the journey of you meeting up with them, understanding why they want this work made, going through the process of what you do as an artist, source your materials. And then maybe to be cool on top of it, we just like add some personal things from their life. So in the case of Q and Benjamin Cat, there was some specific things that he gave me to incorporate within the piece, like things that
Mhm.
belong to Benjamin, or things that were related to Q's life too. Like he had a brewery, like the beer stuff, like, all different things to just make it a really
Right.
special piece for that person.
Mhm.
So that was the pitch to, do this. And then that ended up being the pilot episode with Q. So he came to my house and, we shot like the unveiling of it in my studio.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we did like a little sort of extra couple scenes at a local bar that I know the owner of. We were allowed to use his bar to just kind of shoot some of the chatting about like what we were going to do for the piece and all that kind of stuff. And my brother-in-law, who is a cameraman for ESPN and a great videographer, was able to set up like a great team to come, and they shot me doing a lot of the building of the piece, which is the
Oh,
first time that anybody's ever been with me to like shoot, which we didn't do the whole thing. A lot of it I had to work on myself. So I've never actually had anyone with me from beginning to end of making a piece, but it's the
how did
most that
that
anyone's.
feel?
I mean, there's pressure to kind of be doing something all of the time. So
Yeah.
I knew it would suck in a lot of ways because I like to sit and just kind of like think about it. And I like there to just be like, dead air a lot of the time of me just like troubleshooting in my head about what's next. But if someone's there with a camera just trying to capture every step of this, it's just there's a lot. Even though they told me like, take your time, like don't even do like pretend like we're not here.
Right.
You can't.
No. I have a hard enough time when I just set up the camera and I'm here by myself and the camera is just set up to record whatever I'm doing.
Hmm.
That sometimes is like, oh my God, I'm taking
Distracting.
forever here. My
Hmm.
camera is going to run out of juice or whatever.
Yes. Yes.
But this
Yeah.
is, there's a whole other person there.
It's all the time. I will get the comment like, it would be so cool to see one of your pieces from start to finish. And I agree. It would be awesome. I would love that. It's just so much harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the camera it needs to be recharged. And like sometimes if you're not using it, you're like, oh my God, should I unplug it? Should I turn it off? So I'm saving battery life. And then you forget to start it again when you
Yep.
get back into something.
And then from something like you're doing, you're also needed from different angles.
Mhm.
Like I
Yeah.
see painters and illustrators doing it all the time, and the camera is basically on one side and
Yeah.
they're in front of it and it's
Yeah.
done. You
Yeah.
can't do that with work like this.
Yeah, right. I agree. And like not to sound super vain, but a lot of times I roll down from like bed, I look like a hot mess. And I don't want to be filming myself like, in the middle of doing all of this stuff. I mean, what if it goes viral and then I'm just disgusting on the internet? Like I want to like put some time into this. So it sucks. It's harder than it looks.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. When I'm in work, I got apron, my hair is like standing
Hmm.
up on the head. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not trying to make myself look nice to do my art. But yeah, so anyway, it was a process and we did it, but it was definitely not my favorite having a camera right there while I was working, which, it would be fine if it wasn't the pilot and me trying so hard to make sure that this goes so perfectly. Like perhaps if it got going, it might be something that I got used to and I could
Mhm.
have a better understanding of like, okay, we have this amount of time budgeted, but it was a very short window of time that we had to get this done. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta really like make sure that I'm doing something like as consistently as possible. So I
Yeah.
was like, before they came over with the camera and the setup and before we actually got going, I'm like sitting in front of my computer just studying YouTube videos of black cats and the way their faces are shaped. So that way it's just in my head as good as it can possibly be. In addition to all the reference photos that I printed out of Benjamin Cat, I was just like, I want to have like an excellent knowledge of the shape of their head, where the eyes should be, so I don't have to go back and like refer to this as much as I normally would. It was
Mhm.
it was a little stressful.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome though. So are they, I guess they're shopping that around now?
Yeah,
In
I'm not part of any of that process of it with the producers and anything, but so we finished putting together the sizzle reel. I want to say it was August maybe of last year, and directly after that they started shopping it, and we did do a pitch meeting in like September, October or something,
Mhm.
but I haven't heard anything in months about it. So it could possibly be that they stopped circulating it. Perhaps they didn't think that it was going anywhere. It also didn't help that right after we finished the sizzle reel and putting together the pilot, the writer's strike ended.
Ah,
So all of the projects that had been on the back burner for the entire summer just
came
came
right back.
flooding in. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know.
you never know. If, this stuff takes a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any recent experience in this, but I spent about a decade working in film doing wardrobe
Oh
and
wow.
costume design. I mean, this was now 20 years, more than 20 years ago. But I do know that I've worked on a bunch of pilots that never went anywhere. And I worked on a bunch of movies that never went anywhere, fully finished movies,
Oh
but
wow.
nothing ever happened with them.
Oh
So
wow. How do you feel about that when that happens? Does that feel like knife in the heart, like very upset about it, or is it just like it was enjoyable while it
I
lasted?
think I don't, I feel for the producers because it's really their loss when nothing happens.
Yeah.
But for me, when you're working on a film, you're part of a team, you're part of a family, actually. So
Yeah.
you all get to work together to produce this thing. There's like, depending on the size of the project, there's anywhere from a dozen people to hundreds of people. And
Yeah.
it's really fun to work on a movie or a TV show because you get to know all these people and you're every day you're creating something. So for me, it was always an enjoyable experience that I was glad to have had. I mean, yes, would I have been delighted to have had to go to an opening? Sure. But if it didn't happen, it still was a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds awesome, honestly. So
It was
much fun.
fun. It
Yeah.
was it was a lot of fun. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed for your
Well, thank you.
show. That would be exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it would.
So I noticed that your work, while it's 3D, it's mostly like if bigger animals at their heads and birds, whatever, or lobsters, it's the whole animal, but it's always on some kind of a board.
Mhm.
Have you ever done a freestanding animal?
That is a great question. I do get that question a fair amount, and I haven't. The main reason, so there's two reasons. The first was because the way I would approach building, um, the backboard was so integral to the first few steps. That's how I used to build.
Mhm.
So building a freestanding piece didn't really feel possible with the way that I did it. Now I have completely changed my approach. I don't start on the board anywhere as much as I used to. Often I will build it off the board first and then I will mount it. So there is kind of an opening and a possibility for me to make something freestanding as long as it didn't require some sort of heavy armature inside. Because I do feel like since it's plastic, if it was very big, it could potentially collapse on its own weight. Nothing, well, maybe the dragon, but none of these I think would be an issue with that. But the
So the dragon is really quite big. Is there some kind of a metal structure inside its head?
no, it's just basically a building of just plastics on plastic on plastic. That being said, that approach, I had made an elephant once that was bigger than the dragon, and I was concerned that it would be too big for that approach, that it would need an armature. Same thing, I made a large moose too, and the antler span was a little over 5 feet.
Oh my gosh.
And where it connected to the plastic, I was just like, I used fan blades from ceiling fans. So it was, the bracket was perfect for it. But then I was thinking, okay, like this plastic that it attached to, like we were talking about earlier, has to be like a very, very, very thick plastic, something like those cones, because
Mhm.
if it's too thin, that's just not enough that's not toothy enough for it to like sink into and have some grip to. So it ended up working. I ended up layering enough stuff, but for that one, I really was concerned. Like maybe I'll have to put wood inside this so
Yeah.
that way I can,
Yeah. I
you know,
think about that. I mean, I make small sculptural things, but even those small sculptural things, you have to think of the like how is it gonna stand up?
yeah, right, right. So I mean, the only reason why today I don't do freestanding work is because it's painted plastic. And I feel like freestanding work would be handled too much.
Mm,
I do include a little card in my work when I mail it to someone, basically saying handle it as little as possible. I don't think, dusting it, things like that will do anything to
mhm.
upset the plastic. But I mean, plastic on or paint on plastic, even if it is spray paint, which is the best paint to use, there is a possibility of the chipping or like rubbing off
Right.
or whatever. It shouldn't be handled too much. It should be treated like art. So I feel like freestanding work, I think there's a much greater possibility of it being handled too much and then the paint not lasting as long as it
I
should.
wonder if you would have to coat it with something after the paint then.
I do. So currently, the coating that I use is a clear gloss polyurethane spray, which honestly, there's a huge difference in the way that that covers and coats and protects the piece versus what I was using when I first started, which was just clear gloss spray paint.
Mm.
So specifically polyurethane, I have not had any issues with it. I hope that, my client base hasn't either. The pieces that have hung out for a little bit longer, I've not noticed any chipping, but if you did handle it a lot, I'm sure over the years it would. If you put it
Yeah.
outside, it probably wouldn't last very long.
That's
The
what I was
plastic,
gonna ask if it ever goes outside.
yeah, the plastic will last probably forever. It's
The
plastic.
plastic will fade though.
Yeah, right.
Definitely
So
will fade and in the sun it could probably even dry up and crack.
maybe structurally, the way that I put them together in a way that I mean, I don't think anything is going to happen in terms of just general handling of it. They're
Yeah.
pretty, because it's screws, like pretty firm, and they're pretty strong, but they shouldn't be put outside. I don't think the paint would hold up. I really don't.
Yeah.
I think that over time, like you said, like the bleaching, if it's in hot weather, if it's too humid,
Yeah.
plus like the wood, the board. Yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't.
that'll definitely warp. So,
Yeah.
it might be a stupid question. I've never used spray paint. Is it essentially acrylic paint?
It's different. It's definitely different. So it definitely works better. And I do use some acrylic too, actually, for the detail work. All of like the eyeballs and stuff, anything that I do that's really small detail, I'll get in there with a brush and I'll use acrylic paint. Excuse me. But that being said, it has to have the layer of spray paint on it first for it to hold
Oh,
that paint. So all the spray painting happens, and then the detail work with the acrylic
Got
paint.
it.
If I just went in with acrylic on the plastic, it just doesn't coat it. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It just
It-
peels like right off, like it's just
yeah.
another layer of
No,
plastic.
I've painted kids projects, bottle caps and things like that, and that had the kids painted, and the paint just
Hmm.
peels right off. But
Yeah,
the
spray
soft
paint.
plastic takes to paint pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, spray paint works great. Some types of plastic better than others. I've never had issue with like the basketballs, things like that, or like a lot of the like the plastic knives and forks and things like that. But then there's other things that I notice that don't hold the paint very well, and
Mhm.
I will just choose not to use those things again
Okay.
if I do notice an issue.
Right. Do you ever sand them to get the paint to treat
There
them better?
there's been a couple that I've done that with, but I don't know. It would be hard to get every little area. So
Yeah.
if it's like a big broad like solid area, sometimes that's a good step to take just because it ensures that it'll last a little bit
Right.
longer. But I don't think I would ever go through and just like every little area on it sand it.
Sounds like a pain in the you know what step to take anyways.
Yeah, yeah. I don't see me doing that.
Wow. Well, this has been totally fascinating. I mean, I don't remember how long I've been following you on Instagram. I feel like it's been a couple of years, but I remember very well when I first started, I was like, what is happening here? This is interesting.
Thank you.
So cool.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this. And yeah, if you ever need any extra plastic, you can always hit me up for it. I don't think I'm too far from you. I'm in Westchester County.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in Port
Okay.
Chester, actually,
Okay.
specifically. So
Okay, that's
not,
great.
probably not too far.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite, and this has been lovely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'll put in the links to the people we have mentioned and the documentaries we've mentioned. I'll put that all in the show notes. And of course, your website and Instagram and all of that. So
Awesome.
thank you, Stephanie. This has been fascinating.
Awesome.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks to Stephanie for being here with us today. And thank you for listening. Tune in next time.
This podcast was created, produced, and edited by me, Natalia Korover. Theme music by R.C. Gaida. Find out more about me at artbynatalia.com. Find out about my community at repurposercollective.com and about my kids' education initiatives at ecoloop.art. Thank you for listening.